Can you hear me okay now? Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you, brother. Okay, man, sorry about that. My apologies. Not sure what the problem was. But again, as always, I'd like to give all honor to the Most High Yah, and I'm always thankful for His Son. And I want to say peace to everybody that's listening. And I want to answer a question that was asked, and that is, what is wrong with women pastors or preachers? And I know that's not necessarily a new thing, but the question was asked, and it's not a new thing, but it is becoming more common today to see females as pastors. I can remember the first time I saw that. I grew up in a false church for the first half of my life, and false Christian church. And I remember the first time I ever saw a female preaching. We went regularly, and I was about 16, and it was a woman up there with a collar on, and I had that was my first time ever seeing that, and it didn't sit right with me. I know it was out of place, and but I didn't know anything about Christian doctrine, even though I went there my whole life. Didn't know anything about the Bible, even though I went to church every Sunday. And but I do remember very vividly that that kind of discomfort, or that thinking that something was wrong. And so but today you see that's very common, and it is so common, in fact. Okay, I'm getting is there a sound? I saw Tavion, you say there's sound. Somebody else saying there's no sound. Can you hear me? Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me? What does yes mean? Can you hear me? Okay, the sound is good. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I was saying was that didn't sit right with me. And today it is very common, so much in fact, that it is very often argued that, hey, nothing is wrong with it. And so even to the fact that you could ask the question now, what the reality is that there's not a coincidence that you don't see any female priests. Okay. You see prophetesses in the Bible, right? But a prophetess is not the same as a priest. Okay. It doesn't mean that the Lord is not dealing with women, because a woman cannot be a pastor, the head of a congregation. But what the Lord deals with is He deals with order. Okay. And so the reality is that the Bible tells us that no women can be pastors, no children can be pastors, and most men are disqualified. That's what people, when they ask that question, can a woman be a pastor, they don't really actually consider that most men are not qualified to be a bishop or a pastor. So let's see what the Bible has to say in regards to being a pastor. Let's pick it up in 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter, and verse 34. And in verse 34, it says, let your women keep silence in the churches. Okay, so that right there is showing you, that's showing you something right there. And you go, it's funny because you go to a Christian church today, and they are the majority. But it says, let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. What is that talking about? Let's hold our finger here and go to Genesis, the 3rd chapter. What does he mean by that? Genesis, the 3rd chapter, in verse 16. He takes you all the way back there. He says, unto the women, he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. So what he's telling you is the order of things. So he right there, if the order is the woman is under the man, it'd be in disorder or confusion even to put a woman over the head of a congregation. You can't, because that'd be like putting a child. Like, even you see children preachers. I think like Al Sharpton, I believe, started as a child. You know, he was a false prophet then, he's a false prophet today. Okay. But nevertheless, he says, let young women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. And if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is a shame for women to speak in the church. Okay. So now that right there lets you know the order of things. Let's continue with this. Because as I stated, it doesn't mean that a woman cannot be dealing with the Lord. That's not the case. But as far as being in a position of authority, we know that's not supposed to be. Let's pick it up at Acts, the 21st chapter, just to show you that doesn't mean the Lord is not dealing with women. Acts, the 21st chapter, and verse 9, or verse 8. It says, and the next day we that were of Paul's company departed and came unto Caesarea, and we entered into the house of Philip, the evangelist, which was one of the 7 in the boat with him. And the same man had 4 daughters, virgins, which did prophesy. It didn't say they were false prophets. It didn't say prophetesses. It didn't say they were witches, right? But you know what? They were prophetesses. But what they were not was they were not pastors. They were not heading or shepherding a congregation. Okay, and that's the thing. Let's go to Romans, the 16th chapter. Romans, the 16th chapter. So it is not that it's just the order of things. It's simply order. I'm gonna pick it up here. This is talking about Phoebe. Notice what it says about her. It says in Romans 16:1, I commend you unto Phoebe, our sister, which is a servant of the church, which is in Cenchrea. So now she was a servant. So now so now she was, now this can, I don't want to complicate things, but sometimes people talk about deaconesses. Like my mother was a deaconess in the church. She did a whole lot of things for the church. Now, talking about this false church I was at. So now, one thing about it, because she was raising money for them and things like that, for grant writing and so forth. One thing about it is that you will find that a lot of times a woman will outwork a man in the church, in the congregation. You got sisters that work very hard now, and they serve in the capacity. But does that mean they have the office of deacon? Because a deacon, that office, the deacon's office you are actually a servant. Okay, so you could act as a servant, but not be in the office of servant. And let's see what the qualifications of a deacon are. Then we're going to go to the qualifications. Will lead into the qualifications of a pastor. This is 1 Timothy, the 3rd chapter. 1 Timothy, the 3rd chapter. And let's pick it up at verse 12. It says, let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children in their own house as well. So now, he didn't say let it be a woman or a man, right? He said let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children in their own house as well. For they that have used the office of a deacon. So now, like I said, you could be doing things for your congregation and be a woman and serving in the capacity, but not having the office of deacon, which is a servant, if that makes sense. Or if you can understand it. It said, for they that have used the office of a deacon well purchased to themselves a good degree and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. Right? So again, you don't see a woman mentioned there. You don't see an example or of a woman. You see women helping. You see women doing different things. But when you talk about specific offices, you're talking about men. Okay? Let's pick it up in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians. And we'll pick it up in the 11th chapter. 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter. And notice again, he tells you the order of things. He said, but at verse 3, he said, but I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. Again, so putting a woman in the position of a pastor over the congregation is out of order. Okay? Now, let's go back to 1 Timothy. Okay? And so there we can find something else regarding this order. Okay? 1 Timothy. And I want to read, I didn't read this earlier. I want to read this pertaining to what Paul said in another place about women being silent in the churches. Notice what he said here. Now, he says in 1 Timothy 2:11, and if you were confused or still considering whether or not a woman can preach, now you should understand that what I'm about to read, it should be clear. 1 Timothy 2 and verse 11 reads, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. Okay. So yes, the woman's supposed to be in the synagogue. What's she supposed to be doing? Learning. It even tells you in one place, if she have questions, let her ask her husband at home. But it said, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. Then he goes on to tell you very specifically. He says, but I suffer not a woman to teach. Suffer means allow. So he's instructing Timothy, and he's telling him, but I suffer or allow not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. Okay? So now, remember what we read earlier. We read earlier in 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter, in verse 34, let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, that they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. And I read Genesis 3:16, right? Now, about how he set it up, that the woman was in subjection to the man. And here he tells you why it's inappropriate for a woman to teach or to be a pastor. He says, again, I'm going to read this in verse 12. Because see, a woman may have a feeling or a desire to be a pastor, but you are out of order when you're doing that. He said, and the Lord deals with order. He said, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. And then he's going to take you right back to Genesis. He said, for Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, if they continue in faith and charity and holiness and sobriety. So again, that kills that notion or that idea of a woman pastor. Why can't a woman teach? Because it is out of order, and we don't know anything about order. And that's why our families and our communities are like the way in which they do. Because we're so used to doing things out of order, but the Lord deals with order. He made this world, he made this earth, he made you and everything in this earth. He made it, and everything functions according to order. And the order is Father, Son, man, woman, child. So now, and then you'll go to some churches, and like I said, I don't know if you could hear me or not in the past video that I did try to do, but I talked about how you got child preachers. That's the same. Having a woman preaching is the same as having a child preach. A child's not supposed to be preaching. That's not what he's supposed to be doing. You see, like even in the priests, you see an example of a priest. You see Samuel, who wore the ephod as a child. He was dedicated as a child to serve the Lord. But what you see when they see the priest, they came in at a certain age. You see Jesus starting his ministry at 30. Because what can you do? What can you really tell me about life and minister unto me, and you still piss the bed? What can you tell me about marriage and you haven't hit puberty yet? So, you know, you're gonna tell me about child rearing and child upbringing and how I'm supposed to train up a child, and you a child yourself. You simply haven't experienced enough life. Just like that's inappropriate, it is inappropriate for a man, or excuse me, for a woman to be over the man. So you're supposed to be listening to the one, and that's not what you're supposed to do, right? So he said, again, let the woman learn in silence with all subjection, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. And again, he took you back to Adam and Eve. He said, for Adam was first formed, then Eve, right? He said, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in a transgression. All right, so now let's go right into the third chapter. Let's go right into the third chapter and see the qualifications of a bishop. Because the question that was asked is, why can't a woman teach or preach or be a pastor? Well, when you look at the qualifications here, you'll notice that it's male-centered again, and it disqualifies all children. It disqualifies all women, and it disqualifies most men. So now it's only a select few. So now I said 1 Timothy 3 and verse 1. It said, this is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desires the good work. Right? So it's good if you want to be a pastor, if you're a man. Because he didn't say for man or woman. Right? But then he tells you he's going to go on into some qualifications. He said, a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife. Okay, so just a side note right there, when it says one wife, where there's Mia, more than likely refers to your first wife, that you should still be married to your first wife, and that may indicate what? That you are not somebody who is basically acting in a capacity with women that you shouldn't. And that it implies some type of stability. He said, a bishop then must be blameless, okay? So you need to be upright. It said the husband of one wife. Then he said vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. So, like I said, this disqualifies all children. This disqualifies all women, and it disqualifies most men. Because again, look at what it says. First of all, you got to be blameless, vigilant, sober, good behavior, given to hospitality. Then it says something apt to teach. You have to have the aptitude to teach. And that is given by God. And that is not given to everybody. That's just like even in the secular world, you go to school, you even have teachers. For example, you have teachers that you had in your life. If you go to school, that you be like, this person cannot teach. You've had a class in the college course you paid good money for, and you didn't understand anything. Why? Because it wasn't you like, man, I'm working hard, but this teacher's horrible. Okay, they may understand something, but they don't have the aptitude to teach. Understanding something and the ability to teach it are two different things. And when it comes to the word, see, you see a lot of men that desire to be teachers, they desire to be pastors, because they're thinking that it's all about some prestigious position, not realizing that's you actually a servant. You actually a slave. Okay, if you want to look at it in the proper way, like Paul describes himself as a slave to Christ, and all the things that he was going through, and all the work that he was doing, but he had the aptitude. That was the spirit that was given unto him. So if it's not given unto you, and the person is speaking, even if it's a man, and he doesn't have the aptitude to teach, you be sitting there more confused than when you sat down. You get up from that sermon and you talking about, man, I need to make this a 2-part sermon. And you like, I didn't understand the first part, right? So it may not have been given unto him to teach. And that's different. Just a side note, that's different from these false prophets, because false prophets, all they have to do is be charismatic, speak well. Speaking well is not necessarily the ability to teach. Telling a story, being able to tell stories, is not necessarily the ability to teach. What they are charismatic, they can tell stories, and what they're best at is lying. So when you're dealing with the truth, you can't deal like that. You can't, like my father said, you can't be wrong dealing with this. You have to, to the best of your ability, be right. They can change it. They can make it say what they want to say because they're not telling the truth anyway. Right? So they teachers, but they shepherds of the devil. They're dealing in falsehood. But if you're going to be dealing uprightly, you need to be dealing in truth. And this is an aptitude and ability like any other ability, like somebody who has a knack. You know, I know brothers like Brother Joshua, he's a carpenter, right? Or Brother Micaiah, he deals in computers, things like that. You got brothers that have a natural knack for certain things. They do it really well. So Brother Zerubbabel came from Canada, and that brother, we had an issue, and I was talking to his brother Isaiah, and he was saying, man, Zerubbabel could fix anything. And something happened at the church, and that brother went right to work to fix it. He showed me some, prior to that, he showed me some work that he was doing, and I'm like, man, that'd be nice to have. That is just an ability. He has that's God given. Or you can go to the book and see men they had the spirit on them of craftsmanship that the Lord put on them, and they just had that ability, right? Or like you know, I have children they're musically inclined. They just have that. So, but now that's the same thing as having an aptitude to teach. That's something that's given. You just have it, and it's from the Lord. So that's how you know everybody don't have it. Just like everybody can't be a plumber, everybody can't be a superior athlete. That's just something that everybody doesn't have, right? So then he goes on to some other qualifications. He said, verse 3, not given to wine, no striker. So you're not like a, you know, you're not like an alcoholic, right? Because if you're an alcoholic, you can't be a pastor. Okay. He said no striker, so you can't be violent. Why? Because first time something go wrong, what you gonna do? You gonna be ready to fight. He said not greedy. He said not a filthy lucre, and it can't be you doing this for money, because this ain't about money. This is about something that's not gonna get old, that's not gonna corrupt. You talking about you trying to lead people how to get eternal life. That's not about money. And that's why some of these pastors get up here and they always talking about money, always want your money. You ever notice how your hair's talking about getting your money? We don't get paid. So why would you do something that you're not getting paid for? Because it's bigger than money. Not saying that getting money is wrong if you're teaching the truth. The workman is worthy of his hire. So I'm not saying that, but that's not even the focus. But if you greedy or filthy lucre, you know what you'll do? You'll lie to people, you know, to get them to keep coming so you can get their money. If you worried about filthy lucre, you know what you'll do? You'll turn the eye to some falsehood or to some sin. You'll be indifferent to it. Why? Because if I say something, they might leave and I'm gonna stop getting that money. But if you don't care about the money, you're gonna tell them the truth. He said you got to be patient. Why you got to be patient with people? Because if you ever notice how Paul talks about people in these letters, he calls them children. Why is he calling them children? These grown people. These are adults. He's calling them children because many times, spiritually speaking, people are like children. And when it comes to children, if you like a child, spiritually speaking, you're not mature. And if somebody's not mature, they're going to make some errors in judgment, or in speech, or even you have to be patient with them because they don't understand. That's why he talked about you still need milk because you're like a child. I'm trying to give you some meat to increase your understanding, but you don't get it. That's what Jesus was dealing with his disciples. If you ever notice how Jesus talked about them, is it because we have taken no? He said, beware of the leaven of the scribes and the Pharisees. They said, is it because we have taken no bread? He's like, man, what you talking about? You see why I made all that bread? So I say that because they spiritually they didn't understand. Nicodemus, he's talking to Nicodemus. He said, if you must be born again to inherit the kingdom of God. They say, can I be born again? Do I have to enter into my mother's womb a second time? Like people don't necessarily get it right off. So you got to be patient with people. He said, not a brawler, not covetous. Then he said something, one that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Now, some would say, just a side note, for I understand, you must be married. If you're not married, you can't be a bishop. That's not what he's saying either. Paul wasn't married and he was a bishop. And he had all those congregations, Ephesus, Galatia, right? Philippi, all these congregations under his directive as he followed Christ, obviously. But he had no wife. What he's doing, he's giving you some qualifications. But you know what he said? You know what you do not see here? You don't see a woman. Also, it says, again, for if a man don't know how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Then he says, not a novice. So you can't be new. I just came into this last week and I want to teach. But you a novice though. What'll happen if you do that? Lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without. So, like you a novice, what'll happen is you're not seasoned. As they say, all the people say, you wet behind the ears. That's how that is. You're not seasoned enough to do this. You don't know enough. You're not rooted in this doctrine enough to go out teaching. But everybody want to teach because they want somebody to look at them like, man, I know something. But the reality is when you really know, like look at Jesus, when he really know, look at the rejection that he received. Well, all he knew, the more rejection he received. Look at Paul. The more Paul knew, they beating Paul, they putting Paul in prison, they stoning Paul. They chasing him out of the city. So look at the prophets of old. If you really consider that, it goes beyond, it ain't about somebody just, oh man, it's not like they necessarily gonna listen to you because you teaching. What you find is a lot of times you teaching, and people rejecting. But he said, moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without. So you should have a good reputation amongst not just those within the congregation, but those on the outside. Again, all these qualifications disqualify most men, all women, all children. So he said, moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into the reproach and the snare, which is the trap of the devil. Okay, let's go to Titus. Titus, the first chapter. Titus, the first chapter, chapter 6. Notice what it said here. Again, qualifications. In verse 5, he said, for this cause left I thee in Crete, that thou shouldest set in order the things that are wanting and ordain elders in every city, as I had appointed thee. So now, he said elders, right? And some of these are synonymous. So now he said, okay, so what's their position? Well, 6, if any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of right or unruly. For a bishop must be blameless as the steward of God, not self-willed, not soon angry, not given to wine, no striker, not given to filthy lucre, but a love of hospitality, a love of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate, holding fast the faithful words as he has been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. So these are the qualifications of a bishop. So now you can say, well, you can say now, what is the woman's role? Well, let's look at that in the church. Titus 2. And let's pick it up at verse 3. Because you do have something to teach. It's just not from a pulpit. And sometimes you can teach through your example. Titus 2 and verse 3. The aged women likewise, that they behave. Let me go back to verse 1. Because all men are not teachers. But it says something here, but speak thou the things which become sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober. So now the aged men, those that have a little age on them, hey, they need to be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, and charity and patience, right? But then it says the aged women likewise. that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false. Give me 1 second here. All right. So it said the aged women, likewise, that they be in behavior as becoming holiness, not false accusers, not given to wine, teachers. The aged women, likewise, that they be in behavior as becoming holiness, not accusers, not give. Man. Try it one more time. So it said, again, Titus 2 and 3, the aged women, likewise, that they be in behavior as becoming holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women. So they have something to teach, but what are they teaching? Is it from a pulpit? No. It said that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. So that's what the older women should be teaching them. Side note, the older women today don't even know this. This is actually a problem. So the ones that have an age now are coming to, they not even following the old paths. They not dealing with this. So they really, a lot of them don't even have this to teach to the young women, which is problematic. This is problematic. But that's what they should be teaching. So the older women should be married, and they know how basically to manage their household. They know how to carry themselves, and they have something to teach the young women. That knowledge, I'm gonna be honest, that knowledge is even being lost today. It is unfortunate. It is truly unfortunate. This is and he tells you what the women should do in the churches. Verse 4, this is 1 Timothy 5 and 14, and this is it. He said, I will therefore that the young women marry, bear children, guard the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. Right? So, he was talking about in the context of widows. But see, again, and people, they have an issue with that notion of being a homemaker, but there's, that's you cannot really do anything greater than that as a woman. That's the greatest thing you can do. And that's not demeaning, but to bring life into the world and nurture life, there's no greater act that a woman can do. But with that, brothers and sisters, so that's the answer to the question that was asked. Why can't women be pastors? And with that, I want to remind you that we at the Household of Faith meet every Sabbath at 5925 West 25th Avenue in Gary, Indiana, at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. We live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel. We also have a congregation. We also have a congregation in Virginia that meets at the Red Roof Inn at 153 Garrisonville Road, Stafford, Virginia, at 12:30 Central Eastern. Again, that's 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. Again, Red Roof Inn in Virginia, 153 Garrisonville Road, Stafford, Virginia, at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. And with that, brothers and sisters, it's always my prayer that you will edify.